people. I wasn't alone. From there, I had to tackle forgiving my father. This was considerably harder than my mom. I loved my mom. When she was clean, she was my everything. However, he was my monster. I blamed him for destroying my everything. As I got older, I convinced myself that I didn't care enough about him to be mad. My gran, and only the way my gran could, told me I was full of shit. She told me that I would never be fully free until I figured out how to forgive him. As was usually the case, she was right. So I pulled out my old playbook and wrote him a letter. Unlike my mom, he could write back. And soon, I was one half of the world's weirdest pen pals. I am sure my father nor I ever expected our letters would be in the Washington Post, but life does come at you fast sometimes. And here is the article that ended up in the Washington Post. I got out of bed and followed the smell of bacon and the sound of my parents' voice to the kitchen. The Eagles were harmonizing from the tape deck, and I could hear laughter mixed with kissing. Following the morning routine of fathers everywhere, mine poured a cup of coffee and flipped through the morning paper. He then noticed the time, grabbed a can of Easy Off oven cleaner, and sprayed it directly down his throat. He coughed a little, swallowed hard, kissed my mom goodbye, told me to be good at school, and left for work. My dad, the pill hustler. He would spend his days rocketing his white Chevy Nova over the twisting Appalachian mountain roads to present his Easy Off blistered throat to local doctors in exchange for prescriptions. When I got home from school that afternoon, our tiny HUD-funded apartment in Oceana, West Virginia, looked as if it had been picked up and shaken. There was a lingering smell of stale beer, cigarette ash, empty pill capsules, and rolled up dollar bills littered the coffee table and floor. My mom's star was sitting in her usual place on the couch, but her makeup had slid around and formed a garish mask, and her left eye was starting to swell from a jab by my dad. Her head was slowly slumping forward like a willow that had just started weeping. This was a scene that would be played out again and again throughout my tumultuous 80s childhood. My parents going from giddy at the prospects of scoring drugs to petulant and abusive when they ran out. My parents, the drug addicts. In 2012, 4 years after my mom's overdose, I began corresponding with my dad, Steve, then an inmate in prison. He and I had been estranged for years. I blamed him for making my mother an addict, essentially for killing her. However, when my husband and I became parents, I had an overwhelming need to know how my parents came to choose drugs over me. Steve was the only one left to ask. His letters were filled with soul-shaking guilt and regret. Despite dropping out of high school at 16, his grammar and spelling were solid from years of reading one paperback novel after another. We found we shared some favorites: No Country for Old Men, Lonesome Dove, and Beloved. Steve wrote about falling in love with my mom for the same reasons that everyone fell in love with my mom: her sparkling blue eyes and megawatt smile. Let's see, he said. I was 14 and Star was 16 when we met at school. We had to sneak around because, as you know, your grandparents didn't like me. They would meet up in alleys and sometimes smoke off to a secluded hollow to smoke pot and drink wine, he said. From his smeared South Pearl scrawl, I learned that Steve's stepfather was an abusive alcoholic and that he had done his first shot of dope at 14. I've never been able to shake that feeling of warmth. It totally engulfs you. It whispers to you that everything will be all right. I have done every drug you can imagine, he said. I always come back to opiates, to that warmth. He and my mom didn't choose to be addicts, he assured me, and he was sorry for how my siblings and I were raised. No one would choose the hell that comes with being an addict, Soch. No one. When I first read this, I burned with indignation. What a cop-out. I had chosen not to be a drug addict. It really wasn't that hard. Then I read through his letters again. I thought about Steve as a boy who protected his mom from her abusive husband and then curled up with the warmth of that dope. I made myself admit that I'd often used alcohol as an escape route. I had not chosen addiction, but perhaps it was that addiction hadn't chosen me. I've watched addiction swallow up loved ones, people who were smart and loving and charismatic, and it still took me decades to accept that. As then Surgeon General Murthy stated in his landmark 2016 report, addiction is a chronic illness, not a moral flaw. And this chronic illness, this epidemic, comes with a stigma attached. An estimated 20.8 million people in the United States are living with substance abuse disorder, which is more than the number living with all cancers combined. Yet people don't pin colored ribbons to their lapels for substance abuse awareness or lace up their sneakers to race for the opiate cure. We must see beyond the statistics and headlines. We must remember that buried under disease are people in real families, and some were just a couple of teenagers who fell in love. So, however, once I had answers about my parents, I needed to work through the pain and anger that they, and was able to work through the pain and anger that they had caused. I was able to forgive them. My father and I even attempted to have a relationship, but it didn't work out, and that's okay. I learned that I could forgive him, hope for the best for him, while also accepting that I needed boundaries. It was 10 years ago, and so then, after that, I decided that I had to turn this inward a little bit. I had worked through what my parents had caused me, but then I had to accept what I maybe had caused as well. And that's when I had to work through what had happened to my little brother. So here's the story about my buddy, Zach. It was 10 years ago, not long after I was promoted to assistant vice president at my corporate job, that my little brother appeared in a haze of drugs and desperation, grew out of my old life and pleaded for entry into my new one. And to my everlasting regret, I turned him away. It has taken me a long time to understand the roots of that decision. Understanding makes the guilt bearable, but it doesn't make it go away. My road out of an opioid-ravaged corner of Appalachia was paved by a primal sense of survival and determination. My parents were beautiful, felonious, drug-addicted high school dropouts who ran as wild as kudzu. I was their oldest child and understood from an early age that the odds were not in my favor. Not much was expected of my kind. But I worked harder and made better decisions, or so I told myself, than those who stayed on that rusted merry-go-round of poverty, drugs, petty crimes, and domestic abuse. Moving to Charlotte allowed me to put both physical and emotional distance between those I left behind, including my younger siblings. They were stuck dealing with our spiraling parents, West Virginia's ravaging poverty, and an opioid epidemic rotting large swaths of my home state from the inside out. When it became apparent that my brother Zach had graduated from pot and alcohol to more serious narcotics, I ping-ponged between anger, indifference, and indignation. I had shown him the way out, hadn't I? What more did I owe? Our communication became sporadic, but I called him on his 21st birthday. We exchanged pleasantries before the topic turned more serious. He wanted help. His friends were dying, and he was scared he would be next. I told him he could move in with us. My husband could get him a good job where he could learn a trade, make money, have health insurance. But first he had to be able to pass the company drug test. He admitted that he couldn't, but he asked me if he could live with us long enough to get clean. I said no. 6 months later, he was dead. During his brief stint on Earth, Zach waged war with his demons, and more often than not, he lost. Like our parents, he dropped out of high school, got into drugs, and never held a long-term job. And like them, or maybe because of them, a stigma surrounded him in our town. That stigma would contribute to his death. On a brittle November night, a police officer found my brother in the passenger side of his truck in a McDonald's parking lot. He was arrested and charged with public intoxication. The arresting officer later testified that he believed Zach was under the influence of a controlled substance and not alcohol. Although the officer was unsure what the controlled substance was, he decided to let him sleep it off rather than seek medical attention. Zach died the next day, alone on a cold slab of jailhouse concrete after a blood clot formed in his leg and traveled to his heart. Had it been me, Zach's well-heeled older sister, found passed out in the car, I would certainly have been rushed to the emergency room and not to a jail cell. Still, though I will never forgive that police department for what happened, I know Zach's death has layers to it. So many people failed my brother, including me. We're taught that everyone should be responsible for themselves. We're warned that enabling is no kindness. We're told our love sometimes needs to be tough. That's what I was trying to do in the phone call with my brother, but there is a gaping hole at the heart of this logic. In addition to my brother, I've lost my mom, my dad, friends, cousins to overdose. Drug addiction is merciless, indiscriminate, unyielding, lonely. When someone extends a hand out of such darkness like my brother did, I hope we can take it. If the opioid crisis in America has taught us anything, it should be this. It could happen to any of us. So there are no guarantees, I know. If I said yes to my brother, the story might still have ended the same way, but I'd give anything for a chance to go back in time and find out. However, I know that I can't go back in time. So to not destroy myself with bitterness and grief, I had to figure out what I could do. So one thing I can do is I can stand here and let all of the scared, angry, embarrassed kids that are still out there know that none of this is your fault. You are worthy. You are worthy of love and of security, and you're worthy of your favorite cereal and toys and trips to the ocean. It may take you longer to get there, but that doesn't mean you're not worthy of them. As my friend and mentor, the incomparable Sherry Lynch of the Bob and Sherry Show said, the place you begin doesn't have to be the place you stay. That goes for everyone. I can stand here and tell you to embrace your story, the good, the bad, the ugly, because it takes all of that for you to be uniquely you. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy. The world can be a hard place, and the systems designed to help us are often being held together by Band-Aids and duct tape. However, there is hope. There is hope that your dreams of being wrapped in the warm love you thought only lived other places is what you get to come home to every day. Because although it is hard, although the world looks cruel and uncaring, it's just that the heartless, vile voices are often the loudest. The helpers are out there. As Mr. Rogers told us, in times of trouble, look for them. I spent too much of my life thinking only in terms of black and white, good or bad, success or failure. I've learned that most of life, most of the beauty comes in the gray, in the mundane. The extremes never win, at least not for long. I was obsessed about being successful, proving that I was worthy. I've learned that success isn't what the movies made me think it was. Success is being good with yourself. Success is being loyal and trustworthy and steadfast to the ones you love. Success is having a favorite spot in your house to curl up with a book. Success is sharing a cup of coffee with your best friend. Success is finding a community of your kind of weirdos. Success is loving your people with every cell of your being. Success is hope that your bad days will get better. Success is vulnerability. Success is forgiveness. Success is feeling joy. Even after I broke the cycle and made it out, I thought that feeling joy was a betrayal. I may deserve to not live in poverty, but did I deserve joy? Hell yes, I did, and so do you. One of the greatest lessons I have ever learned is that two things can exist at once. I can forgive my parents and not forget our experience. I can be vulnerable and strong. I can love you and know that it is not good for you to be in my life. To conclude, I'll paraphrase an 18th century Jewish sage. Guess you didn't see that one coming. There's nothing, not fame, not power, not money. There's nothing as liberating as joy. I wish you all joy and love in your journey, wherever it may be at this point, because you are all worthy of it. Keep working. Keep fighting, and know that there are more people rooting for you than you know. Thank you all so much for having me.